When it concerns Nigeria's economy, then it concerns you and I. Nigeria's inflation stood at 15.91%, just dropping slightly from 15.93%. Let's get to explore all of this with Professor Lawal Babatunde. He's a professor of economics, and he joins us live on the program. Professor of economics, professor of accounting, rather, I should say, and finance, Macpherson University. He's also the director of academic planning, Macpherson University. Thank you indeed, Professor Babatunde, for agreeing to talk to us here on the program. If you look at some of that details around the numbers released yesterday by the CBN, the core inflation cooled as well, 15.92%, but where it bites for the average Nigerian is the food inflation, still climbing at to 17.52%. My first question to you as a professional is, do you even believe these numbers?
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show. Obviously, in the issue of this inflation rate, I believe in the numbers because this statistics was released by the National Bureau of Statistics. Of course, the shift from 15.91% in June as of 15.75 in that of May shows that there is a decline in the inflation rate. And what does that suggest? That suggests that as inflation rate decreases, it doesn't necessarily mean that price of items will decrease. For instance, I'll give you an example. For instance, if a bag of rice rise from 60,000 to 90,000 naira, when there is decline in inflation rate, it does not necessarily mean that the price will definitely fall. We are only saying that the reduction in that price is going to move on slowly as it increases. So inflation has a lot of effect on that. And especially Nigerians, they believe in, we believe in food items such as rice, such as beans, and the likes. Also, if you look at businesses, they also involve themselves in businesses. They incur fuel, they incur other items that are needed in the production of their items. And of course, this plays a major role for them, looking at issue of electricity, looking at issue of good roads for them to move their goods. So all this plays a lot of issues on the inflation rate. And of course, when we say this is there, we are saying that the rate is coming down bit by bit. And an average Nigerian is solely focused on what will better the issue of food items in Nigeria. I can't imagine some families whereby, as prices of item increases, salary are not increasing. And you will keep worrying yourself that how do you go about it? So it's a serious issue. And I think the inflation rate is showing that we are moving there gradually. And of course, to show that a time will come whereby Nigeria will enjoy sort of relief from this inflation rate.
So let's get you correctly, Prof. Are you saying that the latest inflation rate does indeed reflect the current economic realities? And I'd like to be clear on what I mean by that. We've had a significant increase in the pump price of petrol since February, when the conflict in the Middle East began, with only a very insignificant moderation in the last week or so. So are you saying that this current inflation, which is the second, by the way, after the conflict in Iran, does it reflect the current economic reality?
Of course, yes. It reflects the current economic reality, because if you look at the issue of fuel prices from February, it has been going up and down, because inflation simply means a persistent and sustained increase in the general price level. So you see that every time there is rise and fall in the issue of petrol, especially the PMS, and it has really affected the performance or the output of Nigerians in the consumption of using this PMS. And also, if you in line with the inflation rate, I'm saying that it aligns, because prices of items are beginning to drop bit by bit. But what I'm only saying is that items that are there will not necessarily mean that because there is a decline in inflation rate, it does not necessarily mean that everything will fall as it is. It will reduce bit by bit, and these items are going to rise. So the economic situation that happened between Iran and the world shows that the decline in the inflation rate will help in improving food items basically in Nigeria, and Nigerians will be able to afford few things as it is. In fact, while I was in Abuja, for a training, I saw a lot of people who were trekking from their offices from their homes to their offices, and I was wondering what could be the cost. People cannot even afford good transportation system. People cannot even afford to get money to transport themselves to their offices. So the inflation rate is significant, and it has helped in cushioning the effect of food items in Nigeria.
Are you saying that between February and June, when February we're buying petrol for about between 750 and 800 naira per liter, and now we're buying for 1,200 naira per liter, that inflation rate could only have come down by about 1% if you considered what inflation was in May, and now when analysts said that it would only be practical to begin to reflect the realities from February when the conflict in Iran began. So are you saying that inflation could only have reduced by about 1%?
I'm not saying that I expect it to have gone further than that, but besides, this is a national. It is not a national issue. It is not an issue within Nigeria. It is an issue outside, because Nigeria solely, thank God for Dangote refinery that is there, that is working. The issue that happened between Iran and US played a major factor in the rise of PMS. Basically, when we're buying at 750, 800, it was better off. But now we are buying at 1,200, and now we are hoping that it will get better, because as of now, fuel is selling for around 1,000, 120 or 1,000, depending on the location that it is. So the inflation rate that has reduced by 1% is to show that we are progressing, and definitely bit by bit we're going to get there, because we are not considering just the local factors that affect the oil sector. We are only looking at other factors that affect them, and basically the 1% is just to show that Nigeria is progressing in terms of inflation rate, and I know before the end of the year, the inflation rate will also reduce.
So, Prof, let's do some further interrogation on the inflation numbers before we move on to other subjects within the time we have. So, for the purpose of education, there are close to 1,000 items in the basket, classified into 13 divisions within COICOP. The greatest and the highest weightage is food, which was reduced from about 51 to 40 because it was redistributed in terms of the rebasing that was done, and the weighted year and the base year. So I needed to clear that. But if you look at the inflation numbers, headline inflation from January to June, which is 6 months, it still stayed around 15%, oscillating marginally, whether it's 15.0 or 15.91, 15.93 as reported. But as of January, if my data is right, food inflation stood at about 8%. That was the first time we had, or one of the first times we had single digit in terms of inflation, food inflation. But as we speak, I think the latest release has food inflation jumping by 100%, so about maybe 17% right now. So how come food inflation is increasing? We can argue astronomically, because in 6 months it has gone almost 100%, while the headline inflation stays.
Okay, thank you very much. You see, when it comes to the issue of food items, basically Nigeria, what we believe majorly is on food items, because everybody loves to do this. You see, this has played a major role, because from 8% that you said in January, and it has increased by almost 100% to show that there is an increase in that. Basically, price of items are very expensive. Like I said, if you go to the market now, you see the price of items that are there. Even to buy flour, to buy yam, to buy rice, it's a bit expensive. Even a basket of tomatoes are also expensive. So we are saying that the government should be able to look into this area so that it can cushion the effect of the citizens, so that it can be able to afford good life, eat good food, and be able to purchase these items. Food is very, very necessary for everybody, because if you look at the price of rice, now like the example I gave the other time, if price of rice rises from 60,000 to 90,000 naira, for instance, how do you think that will affect an average worker in Nigeria, knowing that the minimum wage is 77? So the thing is that government should ensure that the price of food items are reduced and are considered. Also, the cost of transportation is also one of the factors that affects this issue of food. Again, look at how do we move these items. We have the producers of these items from the north, from the east, they are there, but the problem of transportation is an issue. If you ask an average Nigerian, or somebody who is selling pepper, or if somebody who is selling tomatoes, you will ask that how much, what is the factor that has caused this rise in the price of this item. It will tell you that, oh, didn't you know what is happening in Nigeria? The rise of fuel. So it has really affected a lot of the businesses, and that is why you see people finding it difficult to be able to survive and cope. So the point is that there should be more room government should create more room for Nigerians, especially the citizens, to be able to afford food, which is the main source of life of sustenance for everyone in Nigeria.
If I may come in, Prof. Yes. So I want you to be a bit more academic with my question so that people can understand. So the biggest cost component of the average household, we will argue, could be food first, maybe transportation and accommodation, and then others. So my question actually is, if food has the highest weightage and is one of the biggest drivers of inflation that impacts on headline inflation, and food has gone from 8% in January to, say, 16 to 17% in June, yet the headline stays at 15%. How do you explain that as a scholar?
Okay, thank you very much. That is just to talk about the variance or the issues that are there. Basically, if there is the rise from the increase in the percentage of inflation rate for food from 8% to 16%, now it's still standing at 50.1. What we are seeing is that there is just a marginal variance or difference between the actual figure that is supposed to be. Because if you look at it, 8% to 16% to now standing at 15.91 is just marginal. If you look at the difference, it's just 0.9. So what we are saying here is that it is still very, very high on the high side because food items are very, very necessary. There is no market you go to today that you won't see people involving in these food items. Okay, so the percentage that is there is just showing a variance between the actual, which is supposed to be 16% of double, which has been 100%, or the 15.9 as reported by statistics. Basically, go to market. In fact, in Abuja, I went to one of the markets there around Asokoro. I was able to see things, and I was asking myself, how do we get to this level? It is very, very difficult for people to sustain. So the price of items have gone high. They have skyrocketed. They have skyrocketed, and it has caused a lot of problems. People cannot even feed well on this issue. So I feel that the price of fuel, the price of food item is a basic necessity, and the variance between the actual and the reported figure by the National Bureau of Statistics is just to show that we are not there yet, and we'll definitely get there on items of food.
Professor Babatunde, maybe let's bring this conversation a bit more to an area that you are familiar with, which has to do with taxation. Maybe just very briefly, in 30 seconds or less. It's been biting hard for many Nigerians, but the government seems to believe that, you know what, it is good that we do this so that we can shore up the economy. Maybe in 30 seconds or less, speak to this heavy burden of taxation.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, taxation is a very key area that the government is really involved in because it brings more revenue for the government. You see, the issue of taxation is to show that government wants the best for the citizens, because from the tax that have been generated or remitted to the Nigerian Revenue Service and the State Revenue Service, they are there to cushion the effects and to be able to provide for the amenities that are needed by citizens. So when taxes are being paid or are being requested by the government, it is to ensure that these taxes are properly used for developing the nation. So when government requests for tax, either through company income tax or value-added tax or personal income tax and the likes, they are meant to be used for the infrastructure that will help the citizens as a whole. So government is saying that when you pay your tax, we'll be able to use your tax, the tax generated from you, to be able to provide facilities for the citizens.
Well, let's leave it here. Professor Lawal Babatunde is Professor of Accounting and Finance, Director of Academic Planning, Macpherson University. Thank you indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Whether or not those taxes indeed reflects on the tables and lives of Nigerians remains a question that remains on the minds of many Nigerians who live here. But let's take a moment now. When we come back, we'll turn the spotlights to party politics, this time from the lens of the opposition. We're back in just a moment. Please stay with us.